The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the House of Representatives and our nation's capital, I am Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to connect you with Congressman Randy Forbes, representing the 4th District of Virginia. Welcome, sir.
Woody, thanks. It's great to be with you. We're glad to have you up here in the Capitol, and especially one of our subcommittee rooms for the Judiciary Committee.
That's right. You are a member of the Judiciary Committee. Tell us about the jurisdiction that committee has.
The Judiciary Committee probably handles more pieces of legislation than any committee in Congress. It deals with all of our court system, all of basically our laws relating to criminal laws and those types of things. So it has a wide swath, really, of legislation that it includes. We're fortunate to have a wonderful chairman from Virginia, Bob Goodlatte, who chairs that committee, does a wonderful job. This is a subcommittee room in here. The full committee, of course, meets to handle overall legislation, but we have several subcommittees on the Judiciary Committee, and this is one of the smaller subcommittee rooms that will sometime meet for hearings and other business.
And how many members of Congress constitute the
the Judiciary Committee is a relatively small one. For example, if you looked at the Armed Services Committee, you'd be looking at about 62 members. The Judiciary Committee would be about a third of that.
And talk to us a little bit about the Armed Services Committee.
Yeah, the Armed Services Committee is, I think, one of the most important committees in Congress because it handles all of our men and women in uniform, all of the military issues that we have, what kind of ships we're going to have, planes we're going to have, those kinds of things. I am privileged to have been on that since the day that I got here, and I now am able to chair one of the major committees in there, which is the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee. That basically covers all of the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the strike component of aircraft and all from the Air Force would be in there as well. So it's a very good committee to serve on, great deal of satisfaction to try to do something for the men and women who keep us safe every day.
Congratulations. Lots of work there, no doubt about it.
A lot of work. Both those two committees keep you busy. And Woody, as you know, a lot of your listeners and viewers don't know, but sometimes those committees will be meeting at the same time. So we're fortunate they're right down the hallway from each other, but you're literally trying to be in one committee, and sometime my staff will let me know I've got to run down for a vote in the other committee, but it's two wonderful committees that do a lot of good work.
Now, ever since you've been here, I know one of your guiding principles has been the Declaration of Independence, and I think you have that document in your office, and you often walk your constituents through what it means and what our forefathers did in that regard.
And
Talk
Woody,
to us about that.
Even more than that, we, because of the position I'm in now in the Armed Services Committee, almost every major general or admiral is going to be in my office at some time talking about a defense issue. And we literally will look to that document and say, can we stand on the shoulders of the men and women or the men who signed it? And the way it came about, Woody, was kind of interesting. I was in my office one day and kind of bemoaning the fact that Congress doesn't always get a lot done, it seems like. And I looked around my walls, and my walls were pretty typical of most members of Congress. They were filled with pictures, but they were all pictures of me. They're pictures of that member of Congress with the president or with some ambassador, or even a firefighter group. And I realized that you look at those pictures and you sort of subtly begin to think this is all about you. So I brought my staff in. I said, I want to take them all down, and I just want to put on that wall the Declaration of Independence and the 56 signers of that document. And I believe, Woody, as you mentioned, that this is the foundational legal document for our country. If that document's wrong, then everything else we did is illegal. And of course, in that document, it's very important because it said we, basically were given these rights by a creator. And that's so important, and was important to the individuals at the time, because it meant if the creator gave them to us, nobody could take them away, including some committee that might be formed later with Congress or even the king himself.
Tell us a little bit about your district, its geography, demographics, how the economy is doing, those kinds of
Got a
things.
wonderful district. Our district really starts at the North Carolina line in the city of Chesapeake, and we go all the way up Chesterfield County, Powhatan, Amelia, around Richmond. So it's a large district. It takes you about 2.5 hours to drive it from point to point, but it's a very good district because it's got so many kind of diverse elements in it. You have pockets of farmers that do wonderful things for our economy. You've got huge defense industries. You have a lot of great manufacturers that are in our district. And if you look at part of our district, if you look at the eastern part of our district, has a lot of military elements with the Navy, for example. But then the western part of the district has Fort Lee and all of the great things that go from that whole Tri-Cities area, which is there, and the Defense Supply Center. So we got a lot of military interest, defense interest, manufacturing interest, agriculture interest, and it makes it a really, really great district to be able to represent.
So to what extent has sequestration adversely impacted, if at all, your district?
Sequestration has impacted the country, and so therefore it's certainly impacted our district. As you know, defense is so important to Virginia. But Woody, a lot of people don't realize, long before sequestration, beginning about 5 years ago, when the administration first came in office, they began a series of cuts in national defense. And when you look at sequestration for defense, sequestration is about $500 million, $500 million. So when you look at that, that's a big, I'm sorry, $500 billion. When you look at that, that is a huge cut. But before that, they cut $780 billion. So $780 billion. So more than the $500 billion from sequestration. When you add all of those cuts up, that's what's really devastating right now and impacting Virginia, but our overall military across the globe.
Now, to what extent has the Base Realignment Commission had an impact in your district and nationwide?
My district, we fared well. You know, when BRAC is the acronym for that. When you had BRAC, first of all, Virginia and even the commission that was trying to protect facilities in Virginia wrote Fort Lee off and said they were going to close that, and everybody thought they were. Well, we determined that we'd bring everybody together, and we did. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all the local officials. They worked so well as a team, and what we made a decision about was that we weren't going to try to just protect Fort Lee, but we were going to try to expand Fort Lee. And that actually happened. Fort Lee was probably the #2 winner in the country with the last BRAC. And right now, Fort Lee, if you've been there lately, it's different than it was 15 years ago. You know, there's not too many pieces of property that we haven't built a facility on. It will be the logistics capital of the world for years to come, and we're very proud of what Fort Lee is going to be doing.
Now, what kind of private industry do you have in the district?
Great.
For example, is Rolls-Royce located there?
Well, all of their capacity we have in there. But, you know, one of the things that we've got is, you know, we've got, for example, Sabra is in our district, which creates, actually manufactures more hummus than any place in the world. We have all the ramen noodles, you know, on the East Coast, I think, made there. We have, you know, Lipton tea is made there. We have coffee manufacturers that are there. We have some of the best high-tech manufacturing in the world that's really located in that area. But then you also have, you know, Amazon has 2 great facilities, not just one, and you know they're 2 of the top facilities they have in the world that operate from there. We have, of course, you know, you got UPS, FedEx, all operating within there. So we've got a lot of really great businesses that are functioning there, and the big catalyst is still Fort Lee. That's a great economic engine, and then the Defense Supply Center, which is still one of the biggest employers in Chesterfield County.
So talk to us about the importance of assisting veterans, the ones who are currently resident, but the ones who are returning from the theaters of war.
Yeah, Woody, because of the role I have on the Armed Services Committee, literally every morning I wake up and every night when I go to bed, my first thought is, have we done everything we can for the men and women who are fighting for us around the globe to give them the resources? And part of that is honoring the commitment we've made to those men and women who've already fought and our veterans coming back. And we see a high percentage of our veterans who literally can become homeless, you know. We work to make sure that doesn't happen. We also work to make sure that they have the skill sets they need to re-enter the workforce and to go into business if they need to do that. But also the big thing, of course, as you know, is the medical care and making sure they don't just have a card they can wave around that says they have a right to health care, but they actually have the ability to get the services that they need.
And I understand that there are going to be 2 new service centers for veterans, one in Prince William and I think one in the Hampton Roads area.
And we worked on one, as you know, in Emporia a while back to get it. I'm fortunate that the chairman of the VA committee, Jeff Miller, is a very, very close friend of mine. We came in together. We've served all these years together. So we work with him very closely to make sure that our veterans have what they need in Virginia.
And in terms of workforce training, I understand that our community colleges have programs now that will allow veterans to get credit for the experience they've had overseas.
Absolutely, which is important because they've gotten a lot of training out there. But you know, our community colleges are just a gem that we always underfund and we always, I think, underappreciate, but they just are great bang for the buck. They do such good work in providing a lot of our young people opportunities, but also a lot of the individuals who are veterans or other people in the workforce to come get the training they need for the jobs that are out there. We've got a lot of jobs available today if we can just match up the training and capability of what's needed for those jobs, and that's what our community colleges do well.
And of course, you're well aware that the state of Virginia has a 2+2 program, which allows almost automatic admission into our institutions.
Which is a great program. Right. You know, I used to always hate when before I went in Congress, I was in the state legislature, and we'd have these wonderful students that would come up, and they wouldn't get in the university or college that they wanted to get in. And they always thought it was them. You know, they would say, well, I'm not good enough. And sometimes it's just sheer numbers, you know, that are going in there. But what a lot of them never realized was it's sometimes really difficult to get in, but it's not so difficult to transfer in. And so if they're just willing to persevere and go a different direction, they can end up sometime with the same result.
And of course, transportation is another huge issue in your district, in the state, and nationwide. I think the reauthorization of transportation and appropriations relating thereto are going to be before you know it. What's likely to happen? You know, we have all of these energy-efficient cars now, so the tax rate doesn't really keep up with the revenue we need.
Well, Woody, I think clearly we've got a lot of infrastructure that we need, and all you have to do is drive with me one day to come from Washington to Hampton Roads, and you know, you learn how that traffic is. But the good news, I think, is we will have a Surface Transportation Act. It will come up again, and I don't think it'll be passed the first time. I think there'll be a short extension. So I think it's probably sometime in the fall. I was just talking to the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Bill Schuster, just last week about that. He feels very comfortable that we'll get that passed sometime in September or October.
And of course, that's important not only to attract new businesses, but also for the military, because the military has a national security interest, obviously, in getting around when needed.
And Woody, you're exactly right. Also, all of us for evacuation purposes. But the other exciting thing for us, excuse me, is that you know, the Panama Canal is going to be opening up their new expansion. Right. I chair the Panama Canal Expansion Caucus up here, and I met with the ambassador from Panama and one of their commissioners just a couple of weeks ago, and we're excited about the opportunities that could be at the port in Virginia and what that could open up. But it's important that we understand it's not just the depth of the water coming in, it's the ability to get goods out through our trucks and through our railroads that are going to be so important to which port is able to really be most competitive in getting that business.
Let's turn our attention to national security. I know you have a great deal of interest in that, and of course, for the last year or so, ISIS has been in the news. Do we have a strategy?
Well, I'll just go by what the President said. I think many of us on the Armed Services Committee were a little disappointed when we heard him say earlier this week that he doesn't have a strategy. I mean, that's his words, and we have to take him for that. That's kind of scary because we actually had ISIS defeated in 2009, 2010, and because we pulled out and just let them do what they're doing now, it will be a long time before we actually defeat them. But Woody, I think even more frightening when you sit where I sit and you look at all the classified things that are going on. ISIS is kind of the threat du jour. It's what we see on television every night, and because it's something that gets people's attention. But really, if you ask me, and you ask most of the generals at the Pentagon, what's your biggest worry? they would say it's Russia today, and what we see with Russia and North Korea, because Russia is building up more capacity and capability than at any time since the Cold War, and that's really concerning to a lot of people who study these issues like we do.
And of course, I think discussion about Russia was had this past weekend with the G7. Russia is no longer part of the G8 because of their aggressiveness. What else do we need to do in terms of our military preparedness?
We've got to turn this around, Woody. The cuts that I mentioned to you earlier, that's $780 billion of cuts, and then sequestration, $500 billion. We were clamoring during that period of time, you just can't make these cuts and have the right national defense. If you go back to, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago, where we are now, if you took a snapshot, and I got up out of this seat and I had General Welch, who's the top Air Force general, he would come in and tell you that because of those cuts and where we are now, we have the smallest and the oldest Air Force since the history of the Air Force.
Smallest and the oldest.
And that we are in danger of no longer having air dominance in a fight, which we haven't not had since World War II. If you left him and you brought General O'Neill, top person in the Army, he would say that we used to could win 2 conflicts. Now we may not be able to win 1 major conflict. You know, if you brought in Admiral Locklear, who just retired out of the Pacific Command in the Navy, or he would say that if we get down to 260 ships, we cease to be a superpower and we become a regional power. And yet if you look at the Navy shipbuilding plan last year, now we were able to turn this around in my subcommittee, but if we had taken their shipbuilding plan, they would have been at 274, but 11 of those ships would have been cruisers that would have had their radar off, their electronics off, and been demanned. So if you take that 11 out, we were 3 ships short of being where Admiral Locklear would have said we'd have been a regional power. That's something that should concern every American. One last snapshot. 2007, for our combatant commanders around the globe, they're our gold standard, the guys that are in charge of each of these regions. The Navy was able to meet 90% of their validated requirements. This year we'll only meet 44%. That's
44%,
40%, which is a scary place for us to be. We've got to turn that around and start recognizing we've got to do what it takes to make sure that we have a military that will be prepared for tomorrow.
Another thing that's been in the news recently relates to this travel ban on the Taliban 5. Talk to us about that.
Well, you know, the administration has said that they've tried to increase the travel ban so that they couldn't travel. The nexus of that problem was we should never be negotiating with terrorists because it never plays out well. We said that at the time they made this deal. The deal was bad because here's what happens. Once you negotiate with one terrorist, the price tag on all of us goes up higher. And that's what we saw. These 5 people that were released, Woody, were some of the top leadership that the Taliban had. And we know at least 3 of them are trying to get back in that fight. That was a very, very bad thing for us to do, and we're very concerned about what the consequences ultimately will be of it.
I'll circle back a little bit to the kinds of things we should be concerned about beyond ISIS. You mentioned Russia. We just had a recent event where apparently China hacked all of our federal government employees and agencies. Talk to us about that threat.
One of the big things with China that we see, China's growing, they're expanding, they're going to continue to grow and expand, but we can't stop them from that. What we have to do is make sure we're at least prepared for what we're seeing, and the best way we can have that is with a naval presence that's there. When you get them stealing literally 4 million records of employees, that should be concerning, but we haven't even wrapped them on the hand for doing that. We still invite them to our RIMPAC exercises so they can see what we're doing. And now we hear that they're going to invite them to the Boeing plant to see how we're building our planes. So instead of saying there should be some consequences for your action, we just basically as a nation are saying it's okay. What do you think they'll do if we just say it's okay? They're going to stretch the envelope and stretch the envelope more and more. At some point in time, we've got to stand up and say, wait a minute, these things are wrong. And there's going to be some consequences for doing those kind of actions.
Well, I understand we're going to have to wrap up. Before we end, I just wanted to make sure that we've covered everything you wanted to cover if you have any other comments.
No, Woody, I just appreciate the opportunity to represent the people in the 4th District, and we want to encourage them. If they have any thoughts, ideas, questions, they can always get in touch with us by just contacting us at forbes.house.gov. And, you know, we have a large email list that people contact us every day. We love to hear from them and get their thoughts.
Thank you, Congressman Randy Forbes, representing the 4th District of Virginia.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.